So you've been told you need at least $50,000 a year just to exist in Canada, where housing has fully abandoned reality and politicians fix affordability while quietly cashing rent checks. Your income stays flat, rent skyrockets, groceries double, and somehow living paycheck to paycheck is now normal. But guess what? There are Canadian towns where $1,000 a month isn't poverty. It's actually enough to live comfortably, save money, eat real food, and enjoy life without pretending financial survival is an extreme sport.
Like this video if you're tired of being told you're not working hard enough, when the real problem is that housing costs have become completely disconnected from wages. Number 5. Minto, Manitoba, where $1,000 covers everything plus savings. Minto sits in southwestern Manitoba with about 900 people and cost of living so low that urban Canadians assume the town must be condemned, cursed, or experiencing zombie apocalypse. That explains why anyone would charge rent this cheap. According to rental listings from late 2024 and early 2025 on sites like Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace, you can rent a 2-bedroom house with yard in Minto for $400 to $550 monthly, which is what Toronto residents pay weekly for basement rooms in houses with 7 roommates and bathroom situations requiring scheduling and negotiation. Let's break down the monthly budget. Rent $500, utilities $125, for heat, hydro, and water. Groceries $350, buying actual food, not just ramen and regret, leaving $25 for phone, internet, and miscellaneous expenses. That's $975 total, leaving $25 monthly buffer, or $100 if you negotiate lower rent, because landlords here compete for tenants rather than tenants competing with 50 other applicants in bidding wars that make housing feel like auction, where prize is permission to pay someone else's mortgage. The town has medical clinic with family doctors, which in Manitoba's healthcare system is remarkable given doctor shortages affecting larger cities. For hospital services, Brandon is 45 minutes away, providing emergency care and specialist appointments. The distance requires vehicle or reliable transportation, but gas costs are manageable when you're not hemorrhaging money on rent that consumes half your income before you've purchased food or considered other expenses. Groceries in Minto cost slightly more than Winnipeg due to transportation and limited competition, but we're talking 10 to 15% premium, not double. A monthly grocery bill of $350 buys balanced diet, including meat, vegetables, and variety rather than survival rations designed to prevent starvation while providing zero enjoyment or nutrition beyond basic caloric intake that keeps you alive but miserable. The lifestyle is prairie small town, quiet, safe, and centered on outdoor activities, community events, and not spending money because there's nowhere to spend it even if you had extra, which you will because your expenses are under $1,000 monthly. Recreation involves walking, reading, and accepting that entertainment means talking to neighbors or watching prairie sunsets rather than restaurants, bars, or activities requiring continuous spending. One person who moved from Winnipeg described Minto as discovering what having money feels like. Even though I'm earning less. Winnipeg rent was $1,400 for 1-bedroom apartment. Here I pay $500 for entire house. I suddenly have savings, which is completely foreign concept after years of living paycheck to paycheck, because rent consumed everything and left nothing for emergencies or future beyond hoping I don't get sick or fired. Number 4. Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, prairie living on prairie budget. Shaunavon sits in southwest Saskatchewan with about 1,700 people and housing costs that make Saskatoon look expensive, despite Saskatoon being prairie city not exactly known for premium real estate values. According to rental listings, 1-bedroom apartments rent for $350 to $500 monthly, 2-bedroom apartments for $450 to $600, providing housing options that leave significant budget remaining for actual living rather than just surviving. Monthly budget breakdown: rent $450 for 1-bedroom apartment, utilities $100 because Saskatchewan utilities are among Canada's cheapest, thanks to provincial power system not fully privatized into profit-maximizing nightmare. Groceries $300, buying adequate food. Phone and internet $75 for basic service, leaving $75 for savings, emergencies, or occasional purchases beyond bare necessities. The town has Shaunavon Hospital providing emergency services and basic medical care. For specialist appointments, Swift Current is an hour away with larger medical facilities. The medical access is adequate for healthy people, but limited for those with chronic conditions requiring frequent specialist care, which is trade-off for affordability that must be considered honestly rather than dismissed or ignored when planning moves to cheap locations. Cost of living beyond housing is reasonable, with grocery stores providing competition and Saskatchewan's agricultural base making food costs lower than remote regions where everything's flown in. Property taxes for homeowners are low, which landlords pass along as reasonable rent because they're not paying $5,000 annually in taxes, then demanding tenants cover costs through exorbitant rent that makes housing unaffordable. The community is small-town prairie, conservative politically, practical culturally, and focused on ranching heritage rather than progressive urban values that Shaunavon residents generally don't share or care about. Social life revolves around community events, church for those inclined, and activities that don't require spending money because small-town entertainment involves talking to people rather than consuming products designed to extract maximum revenue from participants. Recreation includes hiking in nearby Cypress Hills, fishing in local lakes, and outdoor activities that are free or nearly free. Winter brings cold and wind that tests your commitment to affordable living, but summer brings warmth and prairie beauty that makes you understand why people tolerate harsh winters for 8 months of the year. One person living on disability payments described Shaunavon as, "Only place I can afford to live with dignity. My ODSP provides $1,000 monthly. In any Ontario city, that's poverty requiring food banks and constant stress. Here I rent an apartment, eat well, and have money left over. It's not luxury, but it's life rather than just survival." By the way, if you're thinking about extreme affordability and these rent prices still aren't low enough, check out our video on 5 hidden Canadian regions where land is still $500 an acre. I'll leave it up here. Number 3. Flin, Manitoba, northern mining town with southern prices. Flin sits on the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border with about 5,000 people and rental prices that make you question whether listings are legitimate because northern Manitoba town with actual services shouldn't charge rent this low unless something's seriously wrong. Except nothing's wrong beyond being remote and economically dependent on mining operations that create volatility working residents experience but retirees and remote workers avoid. According to rental listings, 2-bedroom apartments rent for $400 to $600 monthly, 2-bedroom houses for $600 to $800, providing actual housing rather than rooms or basement apartments where you hear everything happening above you and question whether privacy exists or if it's luxury reserved for wealthy people who can afford detached homes. Monthly budget: rent $550 for 2-bedroom apartment, utilities $150 for northern Manitoba winter heating costs that spike when temperatures hit -35. Groceries $400 accounting for northern transportation premiums that add cost but don't make food prohibitively expensive. Internet and phone $75, leaving $85 for miscellaneous expenses, emergencies, or the novel experience of saving money rather than living paycheck to paycheck while one unexpected expense creates crisis requiring debt or charity. Flon has hospital providing emergency services and medical care adequate for most situations. Family doctors serve the area, though getting one requires persistence. For specialist care, the pause is an hour away or Winnipeg 5 hours when major medical intervention is needed, creating healthcare access limitations that must be weighed against housing affordability when deciding if remote northern Manitoba is viable long-term residence. Groceries cost more than southern Manitoba due to transportation, but we're talking 20 to 30% premium, not double. You adapt by buying less processed food, shopping sales, and accepting that some items simply aren't available or cost too much to justify purchasing. The trade-off is that your rent is $550 instead of $1,800, making elevated grocery costs manageable rather than budget-destroying. The landscape is Canadian Shield, with rock, forests, and lakes providing outdoor recreation for people who define quality of life through nature access, rather than restaurants and entertainment requiring continuous spending. Winter is northern Manitoba winter, dark, cold, and long, testing your mental health and vitamin D levels while making you question whether humans should inhabit this latitude or if Canadians are just collectively stubborn about proving we can survive anywhere regardless of whether we should. Number 2. Kapuskasing, Ontario, Northern Ontario. Affordability with French flair. Kapuskasing sits in northeastern Ontario with about 8,000 people, bilingual French and English culture, and housing costs that make Sudbury and Thunder Bay look expensive despite those being Northern Ontario cities not exactly commanding premium real estate prices. Rental listings show one-bedroom apartments for $350 to $500 monthly, two-bedroom apartments for $450 to $650, creating housing affordability that urban Ontario residents assume must involve scams or properties actively collapsing. Monthly budget: rent $500 for one-bedroom apartment, utilities $200 for Northern Ontario. Winter heating costs when temperatures regularly hit -35, and staying warm isn't luxury but survival necessity. Groceries $350, buying reasonable food variety. Phone and internet $75 for basic service, leaving negative $125, which is problem requiring adjustment. The solution is reducing rent to $450 by choosing smaller or less desirable apartment, or reducing utilities by choosing apartment with heat included in rent, or reducing food costs to $300 through careful shopping and cooking everything from scratch rather than buying prepared foods that cost more while providing less nutrition and satisfaction. Adjusted budget: rent $450, utilities included in rent or minimal because building has communal heating, groceries $300 through disciplined shopping, phone and internet $75, leaving $175 for emergencies, savings, or occasional purchases beyond absolute necessities, which feels luxurious after years of urban living where every dollar was allocated before earning it, and unexpected expenses required debt or skipping meals. Kapuskasing has Sensenbrenner Hospital providing emergency services and medical programs. Family doctors accept patients periodically, and specialist care requires Timmins 2 hours away. The medical access is better than many northern towns, while housing remains dramatically cheaper than southern Ontario, where equivalent apartments cost $1,500 monthly in cities where doctors are equally difficult to find, removing medical access advantage that supposedly justifies urban premium pricing. The bilingual culture creates interesting dynamic, with French being primary language for a significant portion of population, which matters if you're Anglophone considering relocation, because daily life will involve French even though bilingualism is common, and people accommodate English speakers, usually with mild exasperation about Anglophones moving to French communities, then complaining about language barriers they created by moving somewhere French without learning the language. Winter is legendary: -40 regularly, snow from October to April, darkness that destroys mental health if you're not prepared with vitamin D supplements, and acceptance that seasonal depression is normal response to 6 months of cold and darkness rather than personal failing requiring medication, though medication also helps because clinical depression and normal response to terrible conditions often overlap in ways that make distinguishing them difficult. Number 1. Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. Mountain living on poverty budget. Tumbler Ridge sits in northeastern BC with about 2,500 people, and rental prices so low for BC that confirming listings are legitimate requires multiple sources, because BC housing this cheap seems impossible unless you're confusing provinces or looking at properties in northern territories rather than British Columbia, where even remote towns usually charge more than this. According to rental listings, two-bedroom apartments rent for $550 to $750 monthly, two-bedroom houses for $700 to $900, providing BC housing at Manitoba prices which shouldn't exist but does, because coal mining economy creates boom-bust volatility that keeps demand low and rent affordable for people not dependent on mining employment that fluctuates with commodity prices and global demand for metallurgical coal. Monthly budget: rent $650 for two-bedroom apartment, utilities $125 for northeastern BC, where electricity and heating costs are moderate, groceries $300 through disciplined shopping accounting for northern BC transportation premiums, phone and internet $75 for basic service, leaving negative $150 requiring adjustments or supplemental income beyond $1,000 monthly, which many people have through part-time work, online income, or government benefits providing additional funds beyond the theoretical $1,000 monthly baseline. Adjusted budget with shared housing: rent $325 splitting two-bedroom with roommate, utilities $63 split, groceries $300 solo, phone and internet $75, leaving $237 for everything else, including transportation costs, occasional purchases, and savings that accumulate slowly but represent massive improvement over urban living, where savings are impossible because rent and basic cost exceed income before considering discretionary spending or future planning. Tumbler Ridge has medical clinic providing basic services. Fort St. John is 90 minutes for hospital and specialist care, requiring vehicle access or expensive transportation arrangements when medical needs arise. The healthcare limitations are significant trade-off for housing affordability that must be considered honestly when assessing whether remote BC mountain town is viable long-term residence versus temporary solution to urban unaffordability. The landscape is stunning Rocky Mountain foothills with waterfalls, hiking trails, and natural beauty rivaling Banff or Jasper at prices not requiring tech salaries or inherited wealth. Recreation is free or nearly free with trail access, waterfalls, and wilderness that's genuine rather than managed park experience requiring fees and reservations. The climate is northeastern BC with winters dropping to -35 or 40, heavy snow, and conditions that test whether you actually enjoy outdoor activities or just thought you did, because trying them once annually on vacation is different from living somewhere winter is 8 months of reality requiring proper clothing, vehicles, and mental preparation for seasonal depression. That's normal response to extended darkness and cold. One person living on CPP and OAS described Tumbler Ridge as only place I can afford to live in BC on fixed income. My pensions provide $1,300 monthly. In Vancouver or Victoria, that's homelessness. Here, I rent half a house for $325, have a roommate who's also on pension, and we live comfortably with money for food, bills, and occasional purchases. It's not luxury, but it's life with dignity and beautiful location. The reality of living on $1,000 monthly in Canada. These 5 places prove that $1,000 monthly can buy actual life rather than just preventing immediate death. But the trade-offs are significant and must be acknowledged honestly. You're living in remote small towns with limited employment, healthcare access that requires planning and travel, harsh climates that test mental and physical health, and social isolation that's challenging for people accustomed to urban density and variety. The people who succeed on $1,000 monthly in these places are those who work remotely, receive disability or pension income not tied to local employment, or have extremely low expenses and needs beyond housing, food, and basic utilities. It's not lifestyle most Canadians would choose voluntarily, but for people priced out of urban Canada or living on fixed incomes inadequate for city living, these places offer dignity and independence impossible in expensive regions, where poverty is default for anyone earning below median income. The budget calculations assume perfect conditions, no emergencies, no debt, no dependence, and robust physical and mental health that doesn't require expensive treatments or frequent medical care. Real life includes unexpected expenses, health issues, and costs beyond minimums calculated here, meaning $1,000 monthly is tight budget requiring discipline, sacrifice, and luck to maintain without supplemental income or assistance. But the fundamental truth these places reveal is that Canadian housing crisis is artificial creation of speculation, inadequate policy, and treating housing as investment vehicle rather than basic necessity. The land exists, the buildings exist, and the infrastructure mostly works. What's missing is political will to make housing affordable in places people want to live. So the alternative becomes moving to places most people don't want to live, where market forces haven't inflated prices beyond what normal humans can afford on normal incomes. By the way, on my channel, Mr. Maple, we dive deep into real estate investment strategies, blending them with smart retirement financial planning and modern approaches to wealth optimization. We also explore income-generating properties and the principles behind long-term asset growth. In fact, we frequently cover property portfolio management along with methods for building passive real estate income. But that's just the beginning. We'll discuss how to strengthen purchasing power, identify high-impact investment opportunities, and navigate the evolving world of real estate markets. We'll break down strategies for capital appreciation, risk-adjusted returns, and financial independence, while exploring the mindset needed to grow a resilient investment portfolio. You'll also find content on economic trends, asset diversification, and powerful techniques for turning real estate knowledge into real-world success. If you're ready to elevate your financial game and build a future fueled by smart investing, Mr. Maple is the place to be. Subscribe to know more,